Back again for another video. On today's topic, we will be talking about testosterone versus estrogen. And I'm not going to break it down necessarily to a scientific point, okay? We're just going to look at the, how can I put it? We're going to look at the phenotypical, I guess you can say, the phenotypical results of the interactions with these hormones, all right? And what I mean by phenotypical, if you guys don't know what that means, is the outward product, the result, the thing that is constant, that we see when these hormones are involved. And the reason why I want to talk about this, hold on for a second, let's get this moved a little bit. But the reason why I want to talk about this is because I've seen it a lot, and I'm sure you guys have seen it a lot. I'm sure you have seen where women are excused. Women are excused and men are not. This is a one-sided thing. This is truly a double standard, and it's a double standard that exists nearly across the globe. It's like standardized in every country, pretty much, especially in the West. There are some places where a man can be a man, and those are usually patriarchal places in many cases. But even still, in those patriarchal places, they still put a cap on how a man can behave according to his hormonal response, right? And the same likewise for women, how they can behave according to their hormonal response. It's been said in many articles, many discussions, many videos. I mean, we see these things, and I don't think we notice what they are, but they're there. They're there. This probably shouldn't be a long video. I'm just playing around with the times a little bit to see what works better for people. If you guys like the longer videos, let me know. If you like the shorter videos, let me know. Because sometimes I feel like I'm rambling. But I'm just speaking through consciousness, a lot of times. I'm speaking through my presence, being here. So sometimes it runs, but I can cut it a little bit. But anyways, when it comes to actions, right? We hold people accountable for those things, but when it comes to women's actions, they seem to get a little bit more grace for their behavior. And most times it's accounted to, well, sometimes, well, actually most times I would say, it's accounted to them being hormonal. And I don't necessarily mean around that time of the month per se, but for the fact that they have a disposition that they can lean on to say, well, I'm a very emotional person. I am, very emotionally reactive. And, this is just the way that I feel at times. And, this is just et cetera, et cetera. Hormonally based, mind you. A lot of these things are definitely hormonally based. It is not out of character for a woman to cry about something that no one else sees to be evidently so in the reason. It is not out of character for a woman to feel like she needs to address the situation with a certain veracity of response that is not warranted. It is not, we're going to say she's a little, but we're not going to think like, wow, she's completely out of pocket. I mean, definitely there are some situations, and a lot of situations, especially in the hood, where chicks is way out of pocket. I just recently seen this article about this woman, and I might put it on the screen, but where this woman, she ran up on a car and tried to rob him, and she got killed as a result. Now, and this was in Chicago. Now, this isn't the bizarre thing about it. The really bizarre thing about it, I mean, because this is Chicago, mind you, okay, so, everybody wants to be thugging it. But The bizarre part about it is that she was pregnant. Just imagine in your mind, a pregnant chick with a baby bump rolling up to your car saying, "Run your cash, fool." Or however they say it in Chicago. "Run your money, Joe." No, that's Philly. Actually, no, that's Chicago too. Just imagine that. Just imagine that. That's bizarre. But anyways, back to the topic. But in the way that women behave, we don't really question it as men. And women don't really question it either. They'll see women do some crazy stuff and they'll be like, "Girl, I understand," knowing that is wrong as hell, or they'll empathize with them, saying that they've been in that position plenty of times, right? But when a man behaves in the way that a man behaves, there's not a lot of grace given for that, even if it's a result of his testosterone, right? The aggression, the bullheadedness, the unchangeable, the unmalleable, the hypersexuality. And I'm not saying every male is hypersexual because of testosterone, but let's just be honest here. What does testosterone do to you as a man? Right? So I know this. So I've known a few women in my lifetime who have went through what they call they were trying to grow facial hair and become men, pretty much. Okay, we're just going to leave it at that. And part of the process were them taking testosterone injections. You don't believe me? Look it up. And they would tell me about what their reactions are. I think there needs to be a study on this, honestly. Because people are doing it naturally, so we can actually study what the effects are of women who take testosterone and how do they feel, especially in their sexuality. I think that is highly important and something that needs to be looked at scientifically on a panel. I think that would help us understand and give us backing, especially as men, to say that we behave this way because of testosterone, meaning that we don't have any control over it. Sure, we have control over some of the things that we do, but we don't have control over having the drive and the feelings and the emotions and the motivation. We don't have any control over that. Women say, "Why do you always think about sex?" Well, why do you cry at things that shouldn't probably be cried at? Why is that acceptable, but it's not acceptable for me as a man to want to desire sex from who I want to desire sex from as much as I would like to desire sex? Why is it okay for a woman to spaz out and then come back and apologize and use the excuse that she's just emotional? Why is that okay? Because shouldn't you hold yourself accountable before you even spaz out to say, maybe I shouldn't react this way, right? And the difference here is what I'm talking about in socialization of what we are teaching our children or not teaching our children. At a very young age, we teach men, I'm going to call it testosterone regulation. How to regulate, not necessarily the testosterone, but the thoughts, the emotions, the dispositions that come behind certain levels of testosterone. We teach men this very early in age. We say that your emotions can get you in trouble. If you act before you think, that can get you in trouble. If you don't do this, if you don't do that, if you do this, if you do that. We have rules, we have standards, we have boundaries, we have things that we use to keep men in check at a very young age from ruining their lives, from making other people's lives unpleasant as a result of testosterone. But how many things do we have in place for estrogen and what it causes you to do and what it causes you to feel? There is no teaching of emotional regulation anymore for women. There is none. The parents are no longer teaching their children when it comes to the females emotional regulation. You know how many times that I think about any of the issues that I've run into when it comes to my submissives or any other woman that I've dealt with in regards to their irrationality, but letting their emotions run them. And I think she has no emotional regulation. She can't control herself. She can't control her emotions. She can't regulate them properly. Remember, I always say that what you practice is what you're good at. And if you practice not being good at something, that's what you'll be good at. You'll be good at not being good at it. Right? And this is how I look at the response from estrogen that women have. But anyways, I wanted to talk about this, the study that I think should happen in regards to these women who take testosterone. They're shown to be very impulsive. They're shown to be very, very, how can I put it? Unmovable, you know. They stand on what they say, you know, and not necessarily saying like, you know, they're good for their word, but if they say something, they probably mean it. A lot of times they meaning that they can relay their intent and actually follow through with it. And that's a positive, definitely. But they've also reported to me that they are highly sexualized as a result. They want sex all the time. Now, keep in mind that even though these women are taking testosterone, they are actually, they still look like women. They still look like women because it's such a low dose. It's not like something crazy. So they don't run into the same issues necessarily that men run into, because let's face it, a woman can get sex very readily easy out here. Okay. It's not very hard for them. Even the bottom of the barrel chicks can get sex. It's not difficult at all. So they don't run into the forced abstinence, you know, area of things like men do. I mean, I can't think of too many men that I've known in my lifetime where they were not forced into a period of abstinence because they could not find a woman. And this isn't to say that necessarily they were unattractive or anything like that. It could have been just a period of time. You know, I've known people on deployments. We've been out, you know, we've been down range for a year and a half. You know, we don't run across women, et cetera, you know. You know, so there are many circumstances in which men run into these situations where they're not just exposed to any women, but we have to regulate that. We have to. What are we going to do? And these men are not gay, by the way, so they're not going to turn to other men. I mean, some men, especially in the military, I've, you know, walked in on a few things that I don't want to see, right? You know, but for the majority of men, that is not the case at all. You know, they don't swing that way, right? So what do they have to do? They have to emotionally regulate. They have to emotionally figure out a way to deal with and cope with that existence and not let it deter them into poor choices. Even if they're amongst women and no woman wants them, what do they have to do? They cannot act on this. They have to regulate themselves. But you put those same group of women in that situation and you give them testosterone, they don't have to wait for anything. There is no teaching of emotional regulation, but that is not the point that I'm making here. The point that I'm making here is the testosterone, I know certainly makes you do things more than not having it. at a certain level and degree, because I've watched these women. They've been my friends, okay? And they have had a lot of sex. They have had a lot of sex. That has been the case. And they didn't have to pause. There was nothing that made them regulate themselves. So I know that having a certain level of testosterone will create a consequence of having a higher and more aggressive sex drive. But no one understands this. There is no grace given to men to say, we understand why you are this way, because it's biologically so. They say that, a man cheating it can be controlled. Definitely, I agree with you. It can be controlled. But is the urge controlled? No, it's not. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the reason why we say that if a woman wants monogamy, then she needs to accept the entire responsibility of a monogamous relationship in regards to that man's needs. This is the reason why we say this, because we understand, and women are starting to get this. I hear to come across the bandwidth now, that if you take on a man, then you necessarily are taking on the responsibility that man requires in regards to his basic needs to be fulfilled, in regards to what he needs a woman for or desires a woman for. But how many years did it take for people to get here? How long have men been suffering because of their testosterone and expected to regulate themselves, while women get to spaz out for no reason, get to make all the irrational choices that they want, get to have a scapegoat for their poor decisions as a result of estrogen? I understand men are very benevolent in regards to how women are being approached in regards to their levels of estrogen. When a woman has that time of the month, especially if you're with her, men are very understanding about those things in many cases. They say, oh, well, she's on her wacky trip. You know what I mean? She's a little bit different these past couple of days. We expect it. But since there is not a point in which a man goes through this, it's just glossed over. For the women who are listening to this, imagine your heightened state of hormonal imbalance all day, every day. Imagine that. Do you think anyone should put up with your behavior? You think people should be understanding if that's who you exist every day? Do you think someone should have to put up with your non-regulation of that response to your hormones? Of course, if someone decides to be with you and they realize that this is just how you biologically are every single day, then you're going to expect that they understand that this is just the way you are and you don't have any control over it. But what they're going to expect from you is regulation, right? Or maybe they're not. Maybe you expect yourself just to be accepted without having any regulation at all, because that's the likelihood that I see. Because we see the same thing on the opposite side, but not understood with men, that we're expected to regulate, whereas women are not expected to regulate due to estrogen, due to testosterone. But this is something that I would say that needs to be talked about more, that needs to be put into the ether more, especially to the women, is that men have testosterone. Wow, did you know that? And we have urges, we have desires, we have dispositions, we have ways about doing things that we do because we are riddled with testosterone every single day. And especially if you work out, definitely your testosterone is high as hell. You become more aggressive, you become more matter of fact, you become less tolerance, you have less tolerance, et cetera, et cetera. Women should understand this. Why? Because we don't have any control over it. Why are we not given the same grace? But anyways, like, comment, and share. Check me out on Facebook. Check me out on Patreon. But until next time, this has been the Wolf of Beta Close. May you have a good day. And of course, peace be with you.